Hey there, this is DIY Life Guide, and today I'm going to be explaining to you how I built a stovetop into my tiny house. If you live in a tiny house or an RV or a cabin or any type of alternative housing, you may be wondering, can I put a stovetop in my small space? Is it safe? I'm here to answer yes, safe, and it's actually the best option that you can really use in this kind of a space. You're not going to have access to abundant electricity. You're not going to have access to a gas line, so really a propane stovetop is probably the only thing you can do to offer an economical way of cooking food. I'll be explaining all the steps on how to install this. Let's get started.
First step is you want to figure out where you want to place the stovetop on your counter. And for me, I wanted to have at least an inch of space between the edge of the counter and the beginning of the stove. If you see underneath here, this is what the stovetop looks like. As you can see, it's sort of a square dimension here. And you can just place this on top of the countertop and make a trace along the edges of the square. And that will be the exact dimension where this will slide into under the countertop. To make the cut into the countertop, just use a circular saw and follow the trace that you've made around the perimeter of the stove. Don't worry if your trace isn't super accurate, because as you can see up here, the edge of the stove actually hangs out over where the stove gets inserted. So if there's like a jagged edge here, it's gonna be covered up by the edge of this. As you can see, we have a propane hose that runs down and through this countertop, and then actually runs through this countertop and then runs through the floor of the house and outside. The line actually runs under the house to the propane tank. To drill this hole, just use a regular wood drill that's wide enough for the width of this propane hose. So you can see the gas line runs under the house like this, all the way to where the hole that I cut over there underneath the stove. And it runs all the way over here. And I have the propane tank here, sort of sheltered under this porch, but still gets lots open movement of air. And this is what it looks like underneath the stove top, where the line actually, and this just screws into the back here real easy. So is having a stovetop in a tiny house safe? And the answer is yes. And people get concerned about carbon monoxide buildup because this is only a 200 square foot space. And they also get worried about some type of a fire hazard. But with how small this house is, I don't have any issues with carbon monoxide buildup. And I have a carbon monoxide and smoke detector right there. I have a carbon monoxide, smoke, and gas detector right there. And I've never had any issues. These have never gone off because of excessive carbon monoxide, and I've been using this stove for 2 years. And I think it's partially because the stovetop, the burners are not that big, so it just doesn't really burn enough to have a buildup of carbon monoxide. When planning for a stovetop, you want to make sure there's ample space above the stovetop so there's no fire hazard. And this stovetop burner is about 2 feet from anything above it. And actually, if you look at it like this, it's actually set out from the things that are above it. So really, it's not in contact with anything. The flame on the stovetop is small enough. It's just really not that big of an issue. This right here is a fire, carbon monoxide, and propane detector. This can determine if there's any leaks in the propane hose or any leaks up here. And thing to know is you want to make sure that this is actually set below the stovetop, because propane is actually heavier than air. So any propane buildup would be against the ground itself.